We have to work through some of the logistics there, but I think we would basically transfer our 1.5 million, if that's the number that the council lands on, to the county for this purpose. We still have some obligations when it comes to reporting and monitoring those, but I think it can be done. And if any of the staff in the audience have concerns with that.
Good evening, Donna Brooks, Grants Coordinator with the Johnson County Board of Supervisors. Something that we've discussed with our ARPA leadership team, which includes the County Attorney's Office, would be looking at participation from the City of Iowa City, possibly through a reimbursement model, so that we can ensure that those benefits or ARPA funds provided by the city directly benefit Iowa City residents. And given that this program is being developed to select as a lottery or a random selection, I think it might be a better idea to see what some of those selection numbers look like in terms of disbursement of county residents based on communities before the city puts in or agrees to a large amount. And again, I know that you guys are elected officials and we're just staff, and these are decisions that elected officials will ultimately make. But being the people that live and breathe both the interim final rule and now the final rule, we do have concerns about whether or not the City of Iowa City could provide their local fiscal recovery funds to communities outside of the City of Iowa City. The rule is pretty clear that these funds should benefit only those residents of the recipient. Any other questions?
I have a question. I have a question about the lottery. Is that based on a speculation or projection that there will be more people needing this money than we have? So that's the rationale for the lottery?
Well, we looked to other local governments, such as the City of St. Louis and the City of Boston. We had a very good meeting with the City of Boston last week regarding their program that they stood up with ARPA funding that provides this type of direct relief or cash transfer as the expenditure category under the U.S. Treasury. But ultimately, the lottery, what it does at a capacity level is if we were to receive 7,000 applications, and we know that 2 million divided by 1,400 is about 1,400, rather than having staff review all 7,000 applications, it allows us to pre-select those numbers that approximately fit with the budget and then review from there. So it just feels like a fair approach. And there certainly, our program includes the opportunity for, in the event of an incomplete application or lacking documentation, there's a 7-day turnaround period for staff to reach out to residents and help them complete their application. Again, the goal is inclusivity, not exclusion, so staff will be doing everything they can. But I'll tell you that the City of Boston had a pretty good laugh about the fact that we were trying to administer this in-house and not going with a third-party provider. They had put out an RFP and split their $1 million budget to $900,000 and $100,000, reserving that 10% for administration.
So that I'm clear on the answer that you gave us as far as if our funds can be utilized with other people outside of Iowa City, did I understand that the rules would say no?
That's our reading of the final rule. And right. we think it would be better to maybe establish a 2080 agreement where the City of Iowa City was reimbursing for any resident of Iowa City that received a direct assistance payment.
But my name is Ray Forsyth, and I'm the Special Projects Manager. Based on the demographics of Iowa City, I think you would be safe to assume that your 1.5 million would be completely absorbed. It would just be then the pool size and the number of approved applicants to get to that 1.5. So it would really depend on the lottery. But having that bigger pool opens it up to more residents. And you would assume that more residents of Iowa City are going to apply because your population is a significant portion of the county.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but if the county was to do the 1,400 and the City of Iowa City wanted to do the 600 on top, is that something that you foresee being an option?
I think so.
Yeah, I think we just want to work with the county attorney's office and the city attorney's office and make sure that we have the proper kind of agreement in place, whatever that looks like, and just making sure, again, that we're kind of cross-referencing against the final rule and maybe even doing some outreach to the U.S. Treasury or to NACO or League of Cities and kind of getting the go-ahead before we start mixing dollars, I guess, in a pool, so to speak. I tend to like the idea of delineating it by resident address, but again, open for discussion and ultimately elected official decision making.
And we will definitely go back and report to the board the desire of a $2,000 payment versus $1,400.
Does creating that extra, it's not a layer, but the extra distinguishing mark of Iowa City residents and that money, does that slow down payment?
No, because part of our application process is residency, acknowledging the residency. So we're going to be tracking where every applicant comes from. So it shouldn't at all.
I will say if we stay with a model of a set application period and we double the budget, then obviously there's going to be a requirement for more staff capacity to review those applications. So in the time period allotted.
So county money that's allocated toward this, it can go to anyone who lives in Johnson County. Is that correct?
That's
Correct.
correct.
So essentially, we would the city by providing funds would be stretching the money pretty much for everyone in that sense. Even though what you're saying is that the city funds could really only go to city residents.
Absolutely.
Unless we targeted those city dollars to city resident or city applicants, city resident applicants.
As far as the residency of the applicants, would we be solid on the address being actually based on municipal boundaries rather than, there's lots of Iowa City addresses that aren't within our boundaries. Is your system set up that way?
I think we would be safe if it's an Iowa City address, it would be an Iowa City resident. I think that's a pretty safe assumption to make.
Now, there are plenty of people. So, for example, out North Dubuque Street, who are residents who have an Iowa City address, but who are not actual residents of the city of Iowa City.
Then they're unincorporated residents of unincorporated Johnson
Johnson
County.
County,
Then
yeah.
they'd
But
be-
although
yeah,
they
then
have an
could-
Iowa City address and a 52240 zip code.
Okay, then they could be, and Johnson County has a GIS system that has layers for qualified census tracts and the unincorporated areas. So we would be vetting applicant addresses through our own GIS system.
Thanks.
Okay.
I just
You
have.
know- oh, go ahead. One of the things that I think probably all of us have is the idea of trying to get people their help as fast as possible.
Right.
Is the lottery system, at least on paper and all the deadlines and stuff, it looks like it would still be into this summer, at least if you do the math that I was reading it, unless I was doing it wrong. Is that a pretty solid estimate of the time? And is there any way to speed that up? Do like I think somebody had just mentioned some starting the distribution while the lottery applications, I don't know. You work
Right.
with that. So what's the fastest way to get people help?
We believe that this is the fastest way to get people help. If we were to process applications as they were received and it took the first come, first served basis, we believe that there are some issues there with equity, frankly, because we know that there are certain populations and groups that can more readily complete an online application, who are more familiar with the program, who have paid attention as it's been developed. And we need time to do outreach to some of those marginalized communities that have not yet been involved in the process. That's the goal of these application workshops, of identifying community partners, of trying to hold these clinics sometimes off-site when necessary to make sure that we're not creating technological barriers, language barriers, outreach barriers, that type of thing.
But I think, also in response, if the city of Iowa City was partnering with us and they were helping us with the technical assistance and the reviews, I think we could definitely speed it up. But at this point, the Board of Supervisors is doing this in-house with existing staff. So resources like that could definitely help speed up the review on the backside.
Absolutely.
I'm still confused as to the answer to Councilor Weiner. So if the person has an address of Iowa City, are you going to consider them an Iowa City person? How did, clarify that again for me?
Our GIS system would tell us if it was a resident of the city of Iowa City versus a resident of unincorporated Johnson
So
County.
you would list them as having the funds from Iowa
Correct,
City?
from
Yes.
Iowa City.
Okay.
Well, if they are a resident of unincorporated Johnson County, we would use Johnson County's local fiscal recovery fund. If they are a resident of Iowa City proper, we would potentially use or could potentially use the City of Iowa City's local fiscal recovery funds.
On top of the county.
I don't think on top of, I think just delineating to make sure that it is clear, that we have a process that is clear up front so that there's less questions should we have to report or provide additional documentation. But I would say my opinion would be, or I guess my understanding would be, not in addition to what the county is providing, but to cost share for Iowa City residents.
Unless you went the approach of just doing a supplemental to Iowa City residents. Then we would use all county money first, and then anybody in Iowa City could get the supplemental payment. Does that make sense?
Which I think that's what we've been talking about, right? Doing the supplemental? Or am I mistaken? To get our Iowa City residents up to 2,000.
I mean, it sounds to me like one of the things that you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is potentially a large enough pool to use up both if we were to allocate 1.5 million in addition to, what is it, 2 million that the county is, that all that would get used up with $1,400 payments. Is that correct?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have good numbers because we don't know how many people are actually going to apply.
As to the timing of payments, I want to be clear about this. I'm talking with a couple of supervisors today. I think their understanding was the application period and then the lottery, and as soon as those that were matched in the lottery were processed, which would be happening on an ongoing basis, that those payments would be happening at that time, that it wouldn't be a 2-month or 6-week processing period and then payments.
Right, it would be a rolling payment based on the review of the application. So if the applications were complete and met all the criteria, then we would start processing payments.
So
we wouldn't hold them all and do one
Right.
massive run of checks.
Yeah, so not, in other words, you end up with, say, all applications due by April 15th. You go through the lottery, pick out however many, any of them that are complete at that time, you start paying out.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think we should, just on this question of what our money could be used to support, if there is a hard line that our dollars could have to stay within the municipal boundaries of Iowa City, which, I haven't read the final rule, but it seems to me that having intergovernmental transfers being, allowed, that there would be some flexibility for intergovernmental transfers to, for example, a county from a city within that county. But I think the administration cost is something we should be talking about. It would make sense to me that Iowa City would be willing to support things like promoting to the vulnerable communities. We talk about translation, we talk about these clinics, right? I would hope that our dollars would support that, but we need an answer to that question, I guess, or we need to be willing to say we believe that this meets it, because I think that would benefit not just Iowa City residents, but is a really important piece of this program.
And in terms of transfer authority, I should say that I am familiar with the county's eligibility, and we know that our transfer authority is limited to certain things, and we can give it back to the state. We cannot transfer our local fiscal recovery funds out of the boundaries of Johnson County. I'm not as familiar with the city's transfer authority, so certainly your city attorney can do more research there. I didn't mean to speak on that as an expert for city government, because I'm not.
So Sue or Jeff, do you have any, or Rachel, do you have any wisdom on that?
Well, I think we can figure it out. Let me just say that I'm convinced that we can figure that out. What I would try to focus you on today is what is your primary objective? Is it to reach as many people as possible? Is it to lift up that proposed $1,400 amount? I think we can accomplish it, but whether it's a blanket transfer, a reimbursement, I think we can definitely figure that out as we go through the rules.
Well, I'm certainly in support. I think we're all in support of the 1.5 million, and it at the same time seems to me, until we have a clearer idea of what the actual number of recipients are, in Iowa City as to how those funds will be distributed on a per-person basis. But for now, I mean, I think it certainly seems like a good start. And once we have a better idea of the level of distribution or the number of distribution, I would think we could revisit, the program at that point.
Well, I think we're going to need to be clear up front when we're promoting the program, especially if you're looking at potentially increasing the amount. You're not going to want to do that probably after you receive applications. So we'll probably need some of that up front. Some of it you may be able to decide at a later point, but ultimately the county's got to put this program together and then build the infrastructure to support it before it goes out the door.
I also am in favor of the 1.5 million, and because I'm new, these questions may have been asked and answered already, but have there already been conversations among staff and the capacity for city staff to be able to help support it was mentioned a few minutes ago about trying to get some more support for the county logistics and reviewing process. Is that something that's been talked about already? And is there that capacity within the city to help? Does that come out through some kind of, I guess I just want to leave it at that as a broad question.
Yeah, we haven't discussed, essentially loaning staff over for this program. I'd have some hesitations with that, just knowing everything else that we're juggling right now. But I think it's completely reasonable to expect that some administrative dollars may have to go with our transfer to support any added hours that they may need or translation expenses, things like that. I think that's a very reasonable request should Johnson County make that.
Yeah, support is a big bucket. So
Yeah.
My other question is to circle back to sort of ensuring as much, I'm not going to come out with it in the right phrasing, but I guess as much safety and protection for those who are most marginalized, and if there is concern about the additional demarcation of Iowa City, because I'm just, we are trying to make this as easy as possible for as many people as possible, but I do have concerns about that, and I just wonder, having that extra delineation, if that introduces any potential risk.
Not to my knowledge off the bat. I can tell you that Johnson County has developed this program diligently as a negative economic impact or a relief program to reduce some of the reporting requirements in terms of income, that 1099s, social security numbers, that type of thing. By building this as a negative economic impact or relief program, we reduce a lot of those requirements that protect the identity of recipients and residents. And I feel like the model of the program has its own safety support, and Iowa City's participation would not change that.
Thanks. I also wanted to just point out that I was fairly well impressed with the templates of that people would have available to be able to attest to their employment. So, thank you.
And I think the other advantage of a partnership with the city of Iowa City is you already have a lot of social networks and social agencies that you fund that would also be of assistance to get the word out. We're looking at having workshops and sessions, but having the additional support from Iowa City could broaden that outreach. And I think we would get to the larger pool would be really beneficial. The more outreach we give, the more respondents we're going to get.
All right. Any more questions, or we can continue discussions?
Just one last couple just quick comments and questions. First of all, forgot to say thank you for the work you've been doing on this. I know we all here appreciate that, and because we all feel very firmly that this is something we need to do to help people, and just even learning more about the scope of the challenge presented. So thank you for that. It's much appreciated. I also would be absolutely in favor of the 1.5 million. One thing from this discussion, and maybe this is more for council, just to make sure that we're clear whether we're talking about covering the $1,400 within city limits, or if we're talking about stacking on top. And I think that's something that we'll talk about, and we'll talk about with the supervisors. I'm new, so I'm making sure I understand where what our next steps are, so.
Sure. Great.
What I heard from staff is we should kind of pick a number and they can figure out the logistics. Is that fair, Jeff?
I think it'd probably be a little easier for us to work out some of the transfer mechanics or reimbursement mechanics, whether we're looking at 2080 agreements or whatever the case may be. We can work that out in between meetings and report back to you. What I would love to get a sense of before we wrap up the conversation is whether you're hoping that Iowa City's contribution of 1.5 million is what I'm hearing from, I believe, a majority, is intended to increase that dollar amount. Are you looking to go from 14 to 2,000? Is that the primary objective? And if so, that gives us the direction we need to work with the county to see how to make that happen.
Yep. And I do think that's something that we need to discuss. If it's the extra 600 on top of the 1,400, we did hear that there could be quite a few residents that would qualify based on the application criteria, and they wouldn't be able to receive any of the funds because of the lottery. And so I do think that.
And that's a great point, Mayor, because if we're going to keep our pool to the same number of people, only some residents get more money than people that are outside of the city. By making our pool bigger, we're guaranteeing that more people will get a payment, whether it be the 1,400 or 2,000. But if you're just adding $600 to anybody who lives in Iowa City, you probably won't run out of money based on the pool size that we're creating. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of anchor this in numbers, if we're contributing 1.5 and the county's at 2 million, that's 3.5 million. If it's 10% administrative costs, that's 350,000. So if you take the difference and divide that by $2,000 per person, it's 1,575 individuals. So I had a conversation with Mazahir Saleh of the Center for Worker Justice, our former Mayor Pro Tem, and she indicated, that their best guess is that the numbers will be in the hundreds of households, not thousands. And Supervisor Sullivan indicated that he thought, an estimate was 600 to 800 households with maybe 2 individuals per household as an average. So that was kind of where my brain was in hitting that number, was that would allow for everyone who, again, we don't know who all would be eligible, but that should meet the anticipated need.
Right, and I would add that at this point, the supervisors are not taking an administrative fee, that we're absorbing the cost of administration at this point. That 2 million is 2 million towards the program. It doesn't have an administration in it.
Okay.
And
obviously that could change, but right now it's not.
And is it your understanding that it's per household or per individual? So if there are 2, like adults in a household, each one would get?
Correct,
Okay.
per individual.
Thank you.
I guess for me, we're doing estimates of how many people would need it. And thanks for giving us some numbers. And I've heard in the hundreds, potentially not in the thousands, but we don't really know. I guess because we do need to kind of move forward and as a council and make some determinations. I guess for me, I would say certainly we can do the 2,000 for Iowa City residents, but I still hear Councilor Burgess maybe making a claim to do 2,000 across the board.
I'm just saying, if we think that's possible, I think that's the best.
I will say, in terms of the number of people who might be eligible, in the final rule, the U.S. Department of Treasury defined what they meant by low to moderate income, and it was a higher number than we had anticipated. So for our program to be eligible for a family of 1, they just have to make less than $45,370 a year. So, and then that goes up there from there based on size of the household. So a lot of people, we think more than several hundred people would be eligible.
But it's also only those who haven't also received.
No. That's how we've structured it to be focused on low to moderate income, and so that is the biggest hurdle to reach.
One of the eligibility requirements is that you didn't receive previous stimulus, but that's not the only,
Correct.
Right.
the only category.
So in other words, there's both the not having received previous stimulus is an eligibility requirement, and it's a higher, the income threshold is higher than you thought it would be.
Correct.
I think requirement is an exclusive term. This program is open to any resident of Johnson County that is low to moderate income. One of the eligibility facets is also exclusion from previous federal stimulus. We're qualifying that as a negative economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you lost a job, if you had housing insecurity, if you lost childcare, if you did
Qualify
not
for other federal programs like WIC.
Yes, qualify for other federal programs. So again, it's to make as many people eligible to access the program as we can under the U.S. Treasury's final rule.
Okay,
So it
that
isn't-
was not clear to me at all. I'm sorry. I
Right.
totally did not understand
I
that.
think that there's been a narrative that this is an excluded workers fund. This is not an excluded workers fund. This is a negative economic relief program for low to moderate income residents of Johnson County who experienced an economic impact as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. We'll continue with the conversations. What are people's thoughts now?
Are we just focusing on the individual disbursements, or there were other items in the memo from Jeff, such as the one on repair and relocation of individuals? Is now a time to discuss that, or some other time?
I mean, we can,
I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with the county
yeah,
and their
I think we
funds and
should
their program.
focus still on the county relief funds.
I mean, I guess not knowing the numbers of people at this point who would be eligible and having just understood that there's a larger pool of people who would be eligible than I had originally thought. I guess I would be in favor of doing $1,400, contributing our $1.5 million and having $1,400 disbursements across the board. Should there be leftover money at the end, then I think we all need to circle back and take a look. But I'm concerned that if right now that with the greater number of people, if we ask that they be plussed up to $2,000, as much as I would like that we might end up excluding people who really could need it.
Yeah, that was my concern as well. So at this point, $1,400 seems to be for me anyway, the baseline that I would like to work with.
If the $1,400 is the baseline, the question that I would have, and maybe this will be a conversation certainly that the county will have to have, for those that don't actually get selected within the pool, can our funds then be given to those individuals that are City of Iowa City residents?
Yeah, I think if you can articulate that's your primary goal, we'll work with the county staff to do our best to make that happen. So if your goal is to reach as many people as you can by contributing our extra 1.5, then we'll try to structure that. I don't know that we can work out all the details and get through all the assumptions tonight, but it seems to be that's the key decision we need. You've made the decision that you want to transfer the 1.5. The next thing that I think we could really use is debating those priorities. Is your priority the higher check amount or to cover as many people as possible? They may not be mutually exclusive, but if we just knew what your top priority is, we might be able to structure the program to address that first and then potentially look at that secondary objective second.
I think because the applications will go out with some information attached to it, it becomes a little tricky if we do my mind would be but we would, anyone that wasn't a part of the lottery, Iowa City resident, they would get $1,400. And then if we still have money beyond that, getting all our residents accounted for, then we can do, on top of that, up to $600 or something like that. But I don't know how that can all be worked out, but at least for me, that would be kind of my desire is to to make sure that everyone is included, because then we could have some individuals that didn't make the lottery that, is a part of the excluded workers, that, really have come before us and asked. So that's how I would, picture that we do it, that we give direction to the county to, go with the 1,400, and then after the lottery is done, anyone look at all Iowa City residents, and can we do 1,400 at that point? For them, it could be, we can do 2,000 for the people that weren't initially a part of the lottery, and then another 600 for those that were. I know it's a little complicated, but I wanted to get it out there.
We must have estimates on how many low to moderate income people there are in Iowa City. I mean, some extrapolation, but I think if income alone is an eligibility, that's a totally different pool than I think what we'd been discussing up until this point. So,
and income alone they're eligible just by income alone.
So even if they received prior COVID relief funds, if they meet the income eligibility, they would get a payment if they're in the lottery and they fill out the application. Okay. Yeah, so that, I guess I did not understand that, including in my conversations with the supervisors today.
So if you think about it this way, we're gonna build the pool by anybody that's low to moderate income. So you have that pool of people. And then the other criteria, it's you've had a negative economic impact. So it could be a layoff, that you belong to a food pantry or delivery program, a WIC, SNAP, you've gotten general assistance from Johnson County, an eviction or foreclosure notice, participation in a housing recovery program, or proof of exclusion from federal stimulus programs. So you're right, there's a lot of people that are low to moderate income, but they also have to show the negative impact, and one of those negative impacts is not receiving federal stimulus program. So it's a two-pronged approach. But
and
we
they only
couldn't
need to qualify under one of those additional criteria.
Right, it's just one additional category besides the low to moderate income.
Because, this at 1,400 each, that would be a little over 1,000. If we were to contribute 1.5 million, we're talking about roughly 1,000 people.
Additional people, correct, to the county's program.
And I just want to make one last comment to reiterate the reason for building this as a negative economic impact program and using that low to moderate income eligibility is it reduces the reportable income, the requirements of 1099s and social security numbers. This is presumed eligibility by the U.S. Treasury if we're responding to a negative economic impact. So this was the broadest and most compliant way to help as many people in need as we can.
Thank you for that explanation, Donna.
Really helpful.
All right, so I feel like we need to either marinate on that or try to come up with some directives for staff.
But I guess my inclination right now is to try and make it as easy as possible, in the sense that if essentially you add to the pool as people who are pulled out in the lottery turn out to be Iowa City residents, we fund them until we run out of money. Presumably the county might, since they have a larger pool of money and maybe fewer people, they would fund county people and then eventually end up funding Iowa City people. once our money runs out. But yeah, so, because I think it would, for me, it might be a little bit too complicated to sort of hold our money for Iowa City people. So whatever we decide, I'm really in favor of the greatest simplicity that we can convey.
Well, and that approach seems to go also with reaching the broadest amount of people, given that the parameters are different. And I am right there with Councilor Burgess. I did not understand so thank you for the explanation. But it seems now that's a kind of a different ballgame. And that being the case, then I think it makes sense that this pool is going to, the eligible people are going to be much bigger than the pool we were envisioning, and therefore it makes sense for us to be able to help more people as simply as possible. So at least right now, I would be in favor of putting it into the pool rather than the sort of the if-then statements of, we can always return to it, as Councilor Weiner had said, and that we could maybe layer on top. But at least initially, it seems to me, let's just put the money in there and allow it to be reaching as many people as possible.
I think one thing we still have to determine is if the city funds can go to a non-Iowa City resident. That hasn't been totally established. So.
Right, but I mean, I think we could, that's true. And I also think that that's probably not administratively that difficult if they are saying this person isn't, at least until you run through the 1.5 million or whatever it was, that this person is an Iowa City resident, therefore their funds are coming out of the pool of money that Iowa City gave.
So with that scenario, I just want to be clear that if the county is running the program and then the county wouldn't use any of the county funds at the initial start with the lottery, is that what I understand?
I'm saying that the county wouldn't use initially county funds for Iowa City residents until they would run through the Iowa City money.
Okay.
For Iowa City, and then the county money. I don't know.
Yeah, at least for me, I think we would want to have the county use their funds with the lottery, and then we come on the back end. But I think today, if we can, we've already made the decision. It sounds like for majority of 1.5 will go to the county, and then the next question that we haven't determined is how we want them to use our money. Is it going to be they use their money up front, and then after the lottery has been spent, we ask them to go back and look at all the Iowa City residents that didn't make the lottery, and we give the $1,400? Or do we have the $600 on top of everybody that made the lottery? But even with that, the numbers wouldn't work out that all of our 1.5 would be used.
I think as we entered into this discussion, one of the things that was a priority or important for me is to make sure that we're helping the excluded workers, whatever that sort of classification, people who were not eligible. It sounds like I too was a little bit confused, but now that this has been clarified that that's one of the requirements, not necessarily all of them. So with that understood now, I'm in favor of the path that still gets us helping as many of the excluded workers as possible. So ideally, I really like the idea of boosting up our number so that our Iowa City residents who would have been in this group could have had $2,000. However, if it makes more sense, we can actually end up on the back end helping as many excluded workers as possible by saying we're just going to kick it in. We'll just basically give the county the ability to get $1,400 into more people's hands, understanding that, just where the population is, we're probably going to burn through that, we'll burn through our 1.5 million, and then the county will end up putting in, covering some additional Iowa City residents. Maybe that's, I don't know, other people understanding that in that way, that the way to get the most help to the biggest number of people who haven't gotten any help yet up to this point is to go with the lower number, but in the broader pool. I mean, that wasn't really what I was hoping we'd end up at,
Yeah.
but if that's the mechanism that we can get those people who haven't gotten help, the help they need, I mean, that's what I would be supportive, and not have to worry too much about splitting, trying not to make the process more complicated and then slowing it down.
I think they need to know our kind of dollar amount at the front end, because that'll determine how many people pass through the lottery. So the difference between, again, based on my math, I'm assuming some administrative costs, but, the difference between 1,500 people and 2,200 people. So I think, I'm with you, Sean. But I think the lower amount, more people.
And I think if we got all the way through this first round and we didn't use up the funds, I mean, I don't know if this might be, this might not be doable, but a round two, where we could say, okay, well, we end up with this much money left over, all the people. So if we use up all the money, or we don't use up all the money, we've gotten through everybody that got in the lottery. So everybody had gotten something, right? So if we have money left, we go until the money runs out. If we have money left over and it's a significant enough amount to help people out, we could say, okay, here's round two. I would think we could do that. I mean, I, again, don't know if that's administratively possible, but that might get us off a dead center here a little bit.
I think it absolutely is, because we're using an electronic system that's going to track all the applicants, so we're going to know who applied. And if we get to the opening and closing and we have less applicants than the pool of money, that's when you can decide if you want to increase the individual payment, or if you wanted to do a second round, or extend the period for longer.
I mean, actually, that's a good point, because if you're closing the applications and you have all the applicants, you're going to know what the maximum amount of applicants are, and if we have the money to cover it, or if we would then be able to plus it up based on the money that's in the pool.
Exactly.
So I want to make sure that I clarify your position. You're wanting to use city money from the beginning for the lottery, is that correct?
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like that would be administratively the most simple, is to just say, here's the 1.5 million, let's get it to as many people as possible, split out at this $1,400 level, and that would capture more of the excluded workers that we've been talking about helping out than if we tried to get too fancy with
Okay.
just by the speed, and then we can get things out faster. Sure. Now, the real concern isn't necessarily that we're going to have money left over; it's that we're going to run out before we hit the number of the end result. And I think at that point in time, maybe we come back and talk with the county about seeing, how much are we running short? Can we put in a little bit more and make it to everyone? But there's no way to know that at this point, for sure. So.
Okay. I heard Councilor Weiner and Councilor Burgess agree with giving the money, having it used at the initial pool. Is there anyone else in agreement with that?
Yeah, I would support that.
Okay, awesome.
I would as well.
Yep.
I would too.
All right, so that's the direction that we're going to give, is that the 1.5 million be used at the onstart of the initial lottery, and that will expand opportunity for everyone in the council and the county at that point.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
Great.
And I would just mention that, I appreciate the excluded workers and the list we've gotten and those that have come before us, but I would hesitate to have the community think that it's just for that group of folks, because I think we're talking about a broader number of people, those that are in need, that haven't received any help, that might not necessarily be classified as the excluded workers. So I would be hesitant in sort of throwing that term around.
And I think that what was just explained to us is really helpful, in the sense that the way that they're able to structure, the fact that they can structure the program this way reduces the amount of proof and paperwork and documentation that anybody who's applying has to produce, and so that's a win all around.
That's a great point, and we would say this is an inclusive fund rather than an exclusive fund. So you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, that privacy piece is really important. Thank you for structuring it that way.
Right.
Great. All right, thank you all from the county. Really appreciate that. If nothing else on this topic, we'll move on to the next one, which is a continuation of our budget discussion. And I know today we have to talk about levy.
Yeah, well, you're right. We do need to, in the next week, determine if the levy that staff has proposed is indeed the max levy that we want to build our public hearing around, which is required by state law. So if you have a desire to raise the levy, we probably at least need to be aware of that and potentially schedule additional session to set what that would be. But I did want to call your attention after Wednesday's capital improvement plan meeting. Council directed staff to look at ways to move the Market Jefferson capital project from 26 to 24. So we put together a memo. It just came in your late handouts today, though, so I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to read that. If you want, I can walk you through what we feel would be the best path forward, but ultimately, you know, if you don't want to start there, if you just want to ask questions, that's your decision as a council to make.
At least for me, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to read here right now. For me to give that final direction or feel like I'm prepared.
I would appreciate a walkthrough.
Sure, and this would not affect your max tax levy decision for this fiscal year. I think it's important that we work this out, but this isn't something that would influence the debt. We wouldn't be bonding for a 24 project this year, so you may have some time to work through that. But essentially, you know, there's a few things to consider when moving up a capital project a couple of years. One is the funding source. So these are bonded funds. We typically aim to bond between $10 and $12 million per year, and that gets us a fairly stable, it's kind of our bond forecast modeling. It gets us a fairly stable tax rate in our debt service levy. So if you deviate too much from that 10 to 12, you could put pressure on that tax rate to either go up or down, depending on which side you were erring on. So to take a $2.6 million project, we can't just put it in 24 without moving something around, without causing a little bit of disruption to our bond modeling. The second piece is staff workload. We build the CIP at kind of a max staff workload. So to take a large project like this and move it forward, we really need to deprioritize something else that the staff, particularly the engineering staff, will be working on. So we have to kind of evaluate those projects and determine what could slide. You've got other projects, you know, especially as you're starting to look at years 22, 23, and 24. We're starting to get those projects under contract for design. So some of these projects already have design agreements with them that we're working on. Other projects may have grant funding tied to them, so some projects may be a little bit more flexible than others. When we looked at this, we proposed a solution that involves juggling half a dozen or more projects to kind of smooth all those factors out. So I just real quick walk you through that year by year, and then I can answer questions that you have. But in 23, so this is the year before you were targeting the Market Jefferson project, we would remove the Dubuque Street reconstruction, and then we would actually slide a couple of things forward from 24. So we're looking at a fire apparatus replacement of over $1 million and moving that up a year. And then moving up some money that we had projected for parkland acquisition as we grow on our west side, knowing that we'll need to probably acquire some parkland out there to serve a growing population. Those were things that we would really have liked to seen in 23, but we didn't put them in there in our initial proposal because of the bonding constraints. So again, take Dubuque out and then push a couple things forward. The Dubuque project would go all the way back to 26. That would kind of fill the space vacated by the Market Jefferson project. In 24, though, because we created some additional capacity by moving that fire apparatus replacement up and the West Side Park acquisition up. That created about $2 million in bond capacity. So that's how we moved the Market Jefferson program up. And then just to help kind of fine tune that number a little bit more, we would actually bump back the Lower City Park shelters and restroom projects. And that's roughly $2.6 million of bonding capacity that would open up then in '24. Don't have to do much in '25, but there is a little bit of domino effects. We did move those Lower City Park shelters back to '25 from '24 to create that little bit of bonding capacity. That caused the domino of the Hickory Hill Park Conklin Shelter Restroom Project to go back 1 year. And then in '26, that's where the Dubuque Street project lands. That is also where the Hickory Hill Park Conklin Shelter and Restroom Replacement lands. The only project that would fall out to the unfunded would be the North Market Square Playground. That's in pretty good shape right now. I think you'd see it introduced again next year in '27. But again, just trying to smooth out the bonding numbers a little bit there. So that's our thoughts on the best way to accomplish the council's objective if you want to move things up. The Dubuque Street project is not under contract. If I didn't say that before, that's one that we're actually negotiating a design contract with right now. We could put a stop to that and then turn our attention to initiating design on Market Jefferson. So another reason why that one works out. I will say, still from a staff perspective, we feel like the needs are greater for the Dubuque Street project. We feel like there's more significant utility and surface deterioration issues on that Dubuque Street corridor, which is why our initial proposal included that before Market Jefferson. But delaying it to '26 is not a concern. We don't have a significant concern that you're going to get a big water main break or anything like that. So I think it would be a safe move if you wanted to do it.
Well, I was the one who initiated this request, and since our meeting on Wednesday, that was one of my focal points since Wednesday was this question. And as I noted in our discussion on Wednesday, there are a number of other projects that concern me as well. I think it's important with respect to advancing two things, really. One is safety. We've been emphasizing the safety aspects of these projects. The other that I think needs to be emphasized is how these streets, which have their auto orientation to them, we are, after all, essentially, by and large, an auto-dependent city, disproportionately impact the safety and transportation choices of youth, persons with disabilities, persons with low incomes, the elderly, as well as those who just would simply prefer either walking, bicycling, or taking transit to driving. And my sense is if that is something the council agrees with, the approach we need to take needs to be a systemic approach. The system is interrelated. Our transportation, our road systems are interrelated. It's not a matter of improving safety and addressing the equities on Market Jefferson. It's really trying to take a comprehensive approach so that we as a city have kind of a coherent strategy with respect to meeting those goals. So with that in mind, and this is perhaps something we could address during our strategic planning exercise, which I guess will be in about a month, is to try to look at it that way. Because I do feel we are, I would want to say perhaps at an inflection point with regard to issues of, how do we, as we are trying with affordable housing, address the inequities that we have in our transportation systems. We put a lot of emphasis on affordable housing, and reasonably so. But the same issues apply to our transportation systems. They are as exclusionary as our housing policy. And so my feeling is we just can't look at this on a project-by-project basis. It's something we need to look at systemically. Those places that have been the most successful at promoting alternative means of transportation take that approach. It's not sort of identifying areas within the city where we want to improve access and so forth. It's citywide. And the remedies are going to vary depending on where you live in Iowa City, but as an overarching approach, it needs to be a systemic approach. And so I'm not personally, I didn't really think of this as being quite so complicated. I'd seen in just under the downtown streetscape plan, projects move back and forth, their budgets increased in certain instances. The playground just sort of popped up. I mean, that wasn't even in the streetscape master plan. It was, in fact, we did a resurfacing of the playground as a quick fix. Well, that resurfacing is going to have to be ripped up to do this project. So it seemed to me I wasn't expecting it to be quite so complicated because we'd been making adjustments just within the streetscape plan itself. But at this point, as I've been trying to emphasize here, it's not that project. Yes, that's an important project, and thankfully we only have 4 one-way streets, multi-lane one-way streets in Iowa City. We're not talking about, a long list of streets which would need to be corrected. It's really a very short list. So that's where I've landed at this point, and I hope you agree that we can leave it where it is, but I hope Market Jefferson, but I hope we understand that we're really going to be successful promoting equity and promoting choice for all our residents in terms of how they get about Iowa City. It has to be a comprehensive approach.
The one thing that did come out of the discussion was for Market and Jefferson, there needs to be some community outreach.
Right. So that's precisely, what I mean. I view the time between now and whenever we want to start thinking about these projects, if we agree that we really need to look at this in a broader way. And in fact, maybe that's helpful. If we're going to be looking at Burlington, if we're going to be looking at Gilbert, Market Jefferson, the Dodge Governor couplet, that we think of our approach toward addressing it to the community in that comprehensive framework, rather than here's a project we're doing. That's just going to draw a reaction to that particular project without that fuller understanding of what I would think we are really attempting to achieve. So it gives us, in that sense, more time to develop a strategy so that we can be successful with this, because I think if it's properly framed, we will be. One thing I did look at in preparation for tonight was the meeting we had with the council back in April of last year. And in my mind, there seemed to be some confusion as to what the intent and benefit of the Market Jefferson conversion really was. It really wasn't framed in the way I was describing it. It was really, it was called for in the master plan, and the downtown district endorses it and so forth. But I don't know that we emphasized accurately what the real benefits would be for that. And I think to be successful, that's what we're going to need to do.
I did want to just make mention that, when I look at this and you're talking about systemic approach and how things are interrelated, I get the picture as far as like looking at the big picture. When things do come down to the organization of CIPs, the interrelated may not be so much there. Although I do believe that staff give consideration to other projects along the way, like, something may have been postponed because of something would be better in place here than, to make it complete here. So I want to at least acknowledge the work that the staff has done to look at this. I think systemically there's something to be said about them coming back today and, giving us a pathway forward, which I really appreciate. When council does have our strategic meeting, I think that's what we're supposed to be doing, is looking at all of the systems, on some level, and trying to create a paragraph that's going to encompass how we want to move forward as a city, what our priorities are. And so certainly I can wait and, not move forward with this and have this a part of again, this won't be a part of the strategic plan specifically. It may come up because the strategic plan is bigger than a project, which we know, but examples come into play all the time when you're talking about a strategic plan. So if the proposal, there's something to be said to at least get this in the hands of the public, because it'll be, I think, 10, 12 years by the time this comes up into the public. Well, at least for them to have these community.
Well, leaving it where it is, it's 2026. The Dodge Street project is 2025. So there are two major projects that fall under this program that I'm suggesting. And the Burlington Street project could very likely not have any capital cost. It would be more just a planning exercise. And the same with Gilbert. Gilbert is not envisioned as a major capital project. It's just a road diet executed by revising the lines of paint in the street. So the two major capital projects that at least we've discussed up to this point would be Market Jefferson and Dodge.
Can someone provide the backstory on Dodge, because I'm not seeing it in here?
Yeah, the Dodge governor couplet, I don't know, Jason or Scott and Ron, I can't see who's all back there, but want to walk us through the Dodge governor.
So the Dodge Street project would be reconstruction of Dodge Street, essentially from Burlington Street to Governor. So it would be similar in layout to what it is today. We'd probably look at tweaking it somewhat. Another piece of that is not only pavement, but utility repairs as well. So water main, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, that kind of stuff as well.
So it's Dodge, just that chunk that was done with Governor?
Yep. And
parallel.
We've gone through and done a functional design, so we haven't started the preliminary or final design for the project. I guess one thing I would note is Dodge Street is joint jurisdiction with the DOT, so that does add another layer of complexity or coordination there as well.
Thank you.
Going back to what the focal point of this, which is Market Jefferson, my understanding when it was initially in the CIP before it came back on is that one of the reasons the downtown district and others supported it was because turning the one-ways into two-ways would really knit together the downtown with the north side in many ways, because the one-ways, people go faster, they're more of a barrier, and that's one of the reasons or a main reason that the downtown district supported it. So as a sort of part of, and so I view that somewhat holistically and as an overarching planning goal, which is how do we essentially increase the walking area, expand what we consider to be the core downtown, and move forward as a city. So I don't feel that strongly as to when it takes place, but that was my understanding of what the background of it was.
It also is where our bike lanes are. So, you know, that I think is another important consideration is, and this is the sort of thing I've been looking at over the last several days, is that when you have a bike lane, you really don't want it to be on a multi-lane one-way street. If you were to place it there, there would need to be significant separation. And our current bike lane on Market and Jefferson is not physically separated. So those are the sorts of, you know, if we're promoting bicycling and we're putting it on a one-way street, there's a we're putting it in a place where there's inevitable conflict and high risk. You know, the one-ways increase vehicular speed, so that, you know, if there is a collision, it could likely be a fatal collision. So those are that's the other overlay with Market Jefferson, is it's part of our bike network that we need to consider.
Yeah, I appreciate, John, what you're saying about holistic approach and, you know, rolling this into our strategic planning. And I think having a little more time, you know, making sure that Market Jefferson stays on the CIP, which it is, you know, back now, and having a little more time to kind of frame that all up and say, okay, how do all these projects, these bigger, really significant projects that we know are planned, how do they fit that goal? Are there any, you know, tweaks, recommendations, that kind of thing, rather than, you know, the moving it up to 24, I feel like is too rushed. Like that, I don't feel like we're being intentional, and we can't, you know, kind of pull in what you're talking about if we do that. And also, I think if the understanding the complexity of this puzzle, and that if it would mean delaying the Dubuque Street reconstruction, I mean, I think that's one that people are relying on, you know, happening in fiscal 23, people being, you know, people on that street, and it is a major undertaking as far as, you know, the planning of reconfiguring the traffic pattern and all of that. And I think that one, we know, you know, one of the big issues in that block long reconstruction is that there is so much vehicle right of way and so little pedestrian right of way, and that's a lot of what's going to be changed, if I understand that project correctly. So I think that still fits with the direction that we're going, but can make sure that that happens at a time that people are already kind of planning for, and then move forward.
Nancy's out there listening in. You know, that was certainly not my intention to start reprioritizing among the downtown projects. I mean, that's the sort of discussion that, you know, would require significant effort on everyone's part to make sure we were in this reshuffling of the projects, that, you know, we reach some consensus on that. My perception of the moving it up, the value of that is diminished if we all agree that there's this larger picture, that this then gives us more time to understand, to prepare ourselves for, and achieve. Because, as I said, if we're just doing a piecemeal approach on this, the public will be confused as to what are we trying to say as a city in terms of our priorities with respect to mobility in Iowa City. It needs to be a consistent message. And, you know, the best example worldwide is Holland, and there are many who, they're in fact exporting their expertise in regard to this, and they were in the same position cities in the United States are 50 years ago. But they made a conscious decision to go in a different direction, and it's a systemic approach. And it made perfect sense to me when I began to see how it's very important to maintain that coherency, rather than pockets of walkability, which is kind of what we have now.
I want to get to other budgetary items, unless there's more comment. I guess maybe we need to give direction to staff as to if we're wanting to go with this revised schedule, or are people...
Sounds to me like not.
Just want to make sure I get a... Yep. So there won't be any changes to the CIP. And then other budgetary items. Any desire to change the levy by any counselor? Now would be a good time to have that discussion. Seeing no one.
I would just say that I'm not willing, I'm not particularly interested in changing the levy right now, because we have to see what the discussion is going to be and where taxes are going to end up on the state level after the state legislative session, because there may well need to be changes next year. We may need to raise the levy next year if the state's no longer going to produce enough income tax revenue to cover what we need to. So I personally favor leaving it where it is for that reason.
I think it's a very pivotal year that we'll be paying attention to, because a lot of changes coming down the pike. Anything else on budget? Going down to continuation of meeting protocol discussions. Eric isn't here, but I did want to just mention that Councilor Weiner and Mayor Pro Tem and I all met with Eric, and as of now, we're going to want to come back and have some presentations by the city attorney the next time around. We just didn't get through all of the needed information before today. So we'll hold off and come back to that. Anything else on that? Clarification of agenda items? And we will have the item number 11. I know that Councilor Burgess will recuse herself. That's about it. And then information packet discussion January 6th.
IP4, and that just very glad to see the security deposit assistance allocation again. So sounds like we blew through those funds and are allocating more to help with that need. So thank you for that.
Okay. January 13th. And we have some IP items there.
Right. I mean, it looks like there's a couple of items there on which we need to give them direction.
Yes. Yep. So we want to start with the IP5, I believe. No. Yes.
Yep.
So the memo from the city manager.
Yeah, just looking for some direction on timing, if you're ready to jump into that in the next month or two. It's typically when we would start, would be once the budget is more or less done. So late February, early March would be typically when we start. And I've got a couple things here that I'd like you to consider. One is whether you want a facilitator or not, and two, whether we try to coordinate with the Better Together 2030 visioning process that's going on. I think that could be really beneficial, but want to make sure you're comfortable with that. And then I'd like for you all to consider a larger window for your strategic plan. We've historically done 2-year plans, but I think moving to a 5-year plan would be really helpful, be helpful for staff. I think it would allow you to think a little bit bigger in terms of what could be accomplished. And as I look back over the last 10 years of strategic plans, most of them have just been fine-tuned from every 2-year period. And so by putting a longer range to that time frame, I think it just may allow us to approach some of these situations a little bit differently. Currently, a lot of our focus is what can we get done in this 2-year period, or what can we make substantial progress towards in this 2-year period, as opposed to thinking a little bit bigger. So any feedback, discussion on those items would be greatly appreciated.
I just want to hop in right away to say I completely agree with looking at a longer year strategic planning window. I think 5 years allows us to do the kind of comprehensive, more connected and coherent kind of vision, and it also allows for scaffolding along the way. 2 years to me does both feel and I think in practice end up being a little bit more chunked out into a project-based kind of outcome, whereas a strategic plan allows you to have projects that work in service of a vision. So I would be in favor of a 5-year strategic planning window.
I would agree with that. I also think it would be, especially since if we're going to be looking larger and more comprehensive, perhaps, and for some shifts, I think could be really helpful to have a facilitator. And I would just point out that whatever we decide to do with the 2030 visioning process from Better Together, that ECCOG is also finishing its essentially 2030 visioning process that's going to be rolled out on March 1st. So it might be worth our while to at least consider those results as well.
Question, if we switch to 5 years, would that change how often we go in and work on the strategic plan, or would it stay the same?
No, you can really go in and amend that or refine it any time you want. Historically, the council's really revisited that every 2 years, and I think anytime you get new council members situated, it's going to be a good exercise to revisit the strategic plan. So I don't think it's a let's do the plan and revisit how we did in 5 years. I think you still continue to look at it, if not annually, every 2 years.
I would think that'd be important, because along those lines, I was thinking that too, as far as the terms of the council. And it's like you could have a totally new council come in and they've got 5 years worth of something that others have planned for them, and they might have different ideas. So I think revisiting it is important, and it's good to point that out, that we can do that.
I'm in favor of us using a third-party facilitator. I think that would be helpful, just especially if we're broadening the scope a little bit or trying to look a little bigger. Having that kind of fresh professional perspective would be helpful to me. And I do agree that we should tie in the Project Better Together 2030 visioning and anything we can learn from the ECCOG process as well. I think the more, having that understanding of what some of those regional ideas would be really helpful. And yes, to 5 years.
I think Councillor Thomas had mentioned that when he and I came on the council, 6, 7 years ago now, we met as a group, and it was even the outgoing and the incoming together. And we did have a facilitator then to help us with our budget discussions and to formulate our strategic plan. And I think at first I was thinking, oh, that's kind of a waste of money, but hearing Councillor Burgess and thinking back, that person, I think it was through the university, someone through the university, seemed to be very helpful in helping us to focus and kind of gathering our ideas together and say, now, is this what you're really trying to get towards? So I would be in favor of that.
Yeah, I support the idea of a third-party facilitator and aligning our strategic plan with Better Together 2030. I think the third item, conceptually, I think the idea of having a more expanded strategic plan framework makes sense, but I would also, at the same time, I think want that strategic plan to be revisited every year just to see where we are with progress on those items. The way it's structured now, it's a little bit awkward because it doesn't quite align with our election cycle. And so if you're new coming in, Sean and Megan, the first shot you have of really seeing things implemented is a year and a half away. It's a, because we're right now approving a budget that doesn't go into effect until July of this year, and it runs through June of the following year. And so there's, between now and the end of June is history. And we've already determined, the budget for the first year, the year after. So, it's a little bit awkward that way in my mind. So it seems to me having that annual review is important. I know there were certain items in our strategic plan that we developed 2 years ago that we never got to. I think it might have been useful to have had an opportunity, at least, a year in, to sort of check in to see where are we with our strategic planning goals. There may be very good reason why certain ones haven't been addressed, but it would just be an opportunity to look at it in terms of, where things stand after a year. So I think both the broader concept makes sense, but I think I would like to kind of formalize a review period that's more on an annual basis.
Sound like there's a majority for 1, 2, and 3. And I would agree that on an annual basis, it should be reviewed, at least just by giving an update. All right. Anything else on IP 5? Moving on to IP 7, which is the joint entities agenda. That meeting is going to be on the 24th of January. It'll be by Zoom, and it's hosted by the Johnson County Board of Supervisors. So for the new counselors, we have the opportunity to put anything on the agenda. Sometimes entities do, sometimes they don't. Iowa City historically has put something on the agenda that's for the broader community to kind of be aware or comment on.
I think when this item came up a while back, I'd mentioned that it'd be good to put this on the joint entities, and that was the opioid crisis settlement fund, because I believe that there were a lot of items in there that communities could jointly work together on using these funds rather than like duplicating services. So I think that it would be helpful to have a discussion at that meeting as far as what people have in mind.
I don't know if Sue could kind of tell us if we're jumping the gun a little bit,
Okay.
or if we need to kind of wait to get more information on that.
I'm just not familiar.
Okay.
I know there's been discussions between our office and the county attorney's office, but I don't know I don't know if Jeff, I don't know the specifics.
No, I obviously you all signed the settlement agreement a couple meetings ago, but I'm not aware of any substantive discussions occurring either internal to Iowa City or in collaboration with other governmental bodies. I think it's probably a little premature unless you just want to indicate that initial interest to say, hey, a lot of us have probably executed this settlement agreement. We're going to be getting these funds. Can we pledge to work together? But to get into a level of detail of how we'll spend those is probably a little bit premature.
Mm-hmm. I think it's possible that the whole agreement was at least temporarily put on hold by a court out east. I think it'll sort of get freed up again, but I think it may be in limbo right now.
I think it's a great discussion, but if we can, at least personally, if we can hold off.
Keep it on the back burner, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it would be great to have on there when it gets to be more closer.
And my experience with these meetings is that they're kind of relatively short and usually not super, I don't know, it doesn't seem like we usually actually have substantive agreement discussions. So anything that even is putting on the radar, I do think is helpful. In my mind, I was thinking about just updates on anything COVID related, understanding that the school district, I don't know like their level of involvement in the drive-through clinics and testing that are being, and maybe we'll hear that from Sam tonight too, but I always think it's helpful to just hear from all the entities of like where we at right now so that from an information sharing standpoint.
Yeah, I think I agree. It would be useful to hear that, as well as if various entities are willing to say where they stand on
ARPA fund decisions. Because there are, like, I know some of the entities don't have very large pots, but it's also useful for them to hear what the others are doing.
So I hear COVID update and ARPA fund updates from cities, and it would just, or municipalities, and anyone can chime in if they want. Anything else?
I'd be interested in the spirit of what Councilor Berg has talked about, that these are sort of like, you bring up something in order to follow up with. I would definitely be interested in finding out from various entities about local childcare solutions, investigations, discussions, in order to be able to signal our interest perhaps in supporting and partnering with work that's already underway from a number of different, the Child Care Coalition is drawing from everywhere in the county, different entities. So I would be interested in putting that forward, just to be able to signal our interest in entering into that conversation.
I think it's a great discussion, but I'm not sure that it would, at least me personally, if that would be the best place to do it, only because I know that you mentioned the Child Care Coalition and Iowa Women's Foundation. It seemed like maybe they can reach out and try to get some more substantive type information. Sometimes these meetings are really, as Laura would say, they kind of go quick in some manner, and I feel like this is a more detailed
Sure.
discussion.
Is there a way to at least, I mean, and this is a question to those who have been at these before, is there a way to signal this interest so that there's I mean, it sounds like there are a lot of different potential partners there. So rather than actually say, could you present us with work that you've been doing, which is more along the lines of the COVID updates, but rather just to signal that these are things that, perhaps we can have a conversation or learn more about this at a different time. Is that possible? I mean, and if this is getting too in the weeds, we can certainly take this, offline. But I just wanted to find out if this is the appropriate forum, and if it isn't, then perhaps the next question, either here or elsewhere, is what would be some good directions to open that conversation up.
I mean, childcare is a concern across the board. I mean, there certainly could be. That's where I would see like maybe the Child Care Coalition coming and giving some type of a presentation, but especially if there is something new coming out through the state or federally, some funding, just to make people aware. At least that's how I see it. I don't know that it will be beneficial for people in municipalities to share updates unless they have, they've taken advantage of something.
Sure.
Do we have like a new business that's on that agenda? Because it seems like, just being able to say, hey, coming down the pike at some point, we'd like to collaborate. My experience in our collaborating with the county on ARPA just really shows how much intentionality it requires. I think we all were just like, yeah, we'll work together. And now we're, so many months into it, and staff's done, almost all the work. We've had 3 conversations about it. So I like the idea of kind of flagging, hey, this is an issue that in the future we want to work together on. The district's doing something, the county's doing something. The city has talked about that in terms of our strategic ARPA, expenditures.
Can we bring, again, I think we can bring in kind of the Child Care Coalition or Iowa Women's Foundation to give us like a comprehensive overview of what's happening?
There are a number of players who are really focused on this. Child Care Coalition, Jennifer Banta, Dawn Oliver Wyand, actually Mary Masher is very, Representative Masher is very involved in this as well. And I think the school district has, at least the ICCSD has a big potential piece of it if we eventually step back and look at the potential for lost and trying to make sure that there's universal pre-K with wraparound care, because that all, so there's a lot of pieces to it, but so there are a lot of potential presenters.
So are you thinking, with that being said, it could be an item and then just municipalities just jump in, or do we, because I don't feel like the city has an update.
Yeah, if we put an item on, we're generally expected to lead the discussion on that. So just hearing you talk, what I might suggest, I think you are going this route, Councilor Burgess, is try to get some consensus that for a future meeting, you invite the coalition or a group to present, and then, you know, generally explore common interests or areas of collaboration. But I would frame it like that. This isn't really for today, but we have an interest in this. Is anybody else around the table interested? And if yes, can we invite this guest to come to our next meeting? And you meet quarterly, so it'll just be a few months away.
And it's going to be it's also going to be a big topic at the legislative session again. I feel like a broken record right now, but so it's going to be a moving target in some ways. And I think over the next couple of months before the follow-on meeting to this one, we'll know a lot more about what they're going to do and not do at the state level.
Mm-hmm. Any other agenda item ideas? All right, hearing none. So staff has what we're doing? There's two.
Yeah, I have 2 updates, COVID updates from governments, ARPA updates from governments, and then we'll frame some sort of child care teaser in there, if that.
And I do think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're really wanting public health and potentially maybe University of Iowa to give some COVID updates?
Yeah, and honestly, Mayor, I was even thinking, like, you know, just saying what the cities are doing. I don't know, does everybody in the joint entities group know that we still have a mask mandate, for example? You know, I mean, just that kind of level of information to say, here's where we are, what we're doing with our facilities, programs, that kind of thing.
Sure. I think we can certainly alert Sam Jarvis to give an update, and then it'll just be an open agenda item for anybody to chime in. All right. Okay. Moving on to council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees.
Well, since I mentioned ECOG before, I'm still part of ECOG just insofar as they're rolling out their version of this Visioning 2030. So we had yet another meeting next week. They're getting ready to really roll out the final version, which I believe will likely be a public meeting in which people can participate, of course, on a city council day. It's going to be March 1st. Up at Cedar Ridge, at Cedar Ridge, but I think it'll start at 2, so there's some time in there. The thing that I found most interesting about the last discussion is they were trying to get people to rank a whole variety of things that had been discussed under different pillars as to what would be the driver engines for this whole larger region, it was very interesting to me that the things that people ranked the highest were the basic building blocks of creating a livable place. They weren't let's create a biotech center here, or let's try and pull in this. They were let's figure out affordable housing, let's figure out childcare, and let's figure out how to make all our immigrants feel welcome. Essentially, those were the top 3 items. So I'm curious to see where it all lands, but I thought it was fascinating that it was really among this not small group of people from a not small group of counties that with a lot of other technical and other possibilities there, those were the top items.
And what were they? Housing, childcare, and what was the third one?
Basically creating a welcoming place to be able to bring the immigrants in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of, put another way, workforce issues.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'll just mention that tomorrow I'll be leaving for Washington, D.C. to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and typically the Mayor's Innovation Project would overlap 2 conferences at one time, which is typically like 7 a.m. or 7:30 start all the way till 9 p.m. So it'll be a little easier, I think, this time around with only one in place. But these conferences do offer experiences from other cities to present, and the things that you just mentioned, housing, some of those key things that we are trying to, do better in our own community. Sometimes there's things that they mention and it's, whoa, this could be very helpful. So hoping to bring back a lot of new ideas, maybe for our strategic planning.
And I got to sit in on my first City of Literature UNESCO board meeting, and the timing of it is fantastic because they are in the midst of looking forward to the One Book, Two Book Festival, which is of young writers in the, actually it's throughout all of Iowa, and they are given a fantastic opportunity to express themselves and to be literary, and it goes all the way from K to 8. I should know this better because I've actually adjudicated it as part of partnership with ACT. There's a staff of writing specialists who get the opportunity to read these essays, and then through a really wonderful rubric that was created to adjudicate the best essays, and then the winners read their stuff. And this may all be information that you already know, but I just had to wax enthusiastic about it. Additionally, they are going to put a skating rink out at Black Hawk Park, which is going to be a really nice way to be able to have kind of some safe gathering, and they've done it before, and they're going to do it again. So that will be coming up.
Great. We are at the point of our break, and we will be back at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. And I'm going to call the City of Iowa City meeting to order on January 18th, 2022. And I'm going to start with the roll call, please.
Alter,
Here.
Burgess,
Here.
Harmson,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Teague,
Here.
Thomas,
Here.
Weiner.
Here.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. And we also have not only people in the audience, but we have some individuals on Zoom. So welcome to you all as well. If you should have any issues, please raise your hand and let us know if you can't hear us, and we'll try to get that resolved. But want to welcome everyone. And yesterday was Dr. King's Day, and so I hope people had the opportunity to stop and commemorate the man with the dream that we are now still pursuing as a country. And we're going to start with item number 1, which is a special presentation, or item number 2, which is a special presentation. 2A is a COVID update from Johnson County Public Health, Sam Jarvis, who is the Community Health Division Manager. Welcome.
Good evening to the Iowa City Council. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to provide updates. Certainly wish we could state that we're seeing a decrease in cases, but we are still seeing a pretty significant level of transmission. I know the staff had mentioned earlier this week or this morning in our COVID update internally that over the past 7 days we've seen roughly about 2,800 cases. And so to put that in comparison or context, at one point in time near the end of summer, we were showing concern when we had 400 cases within a 7-day reporting period and starting to creep into high transmission. And now we are really beyond that point. And so ourselves, much like the rest of the state and other parts of the nation, are seeing that Omicron surge right now. So what are we looking to do about that? As always, we are continuing to promote and strongly encourage everyone to get vaccinated and boosted. And to clarify in the language that many have probably noticed, the CDC posture and state is to be up to date, which includes to be fully vaccinated, but get that booster shot when you're eligible, which now for mRNA vaccines or Pfizer and Moderna, that's 5 months after your primary series. And so we continue to do our best to clarify that information, because we know within the past several weeks, much has changed, and quite quickly, given the speed that we've seen this increase in cases. So our staff are available to answer those questions throughout the day. We are continuing to update our communication pieces and guidance out to the community and other work groups that we've stood up with different sectors, whether it's our schools and daycares and others. So we'll continue to push that information out as best as possible, because we know that it's not that always that folks are operating off of misinformation or even the wrong information, but it might be just out of date. And so we want to continue to stress that clarification. And then certainly, and what's probably at top of mind, is the recent communication we've seen from the CDC about masks. And above all, we still want to stress that any mask is better than no mask, especially when we're talking about indoor spaces and community transmission. But that it's really about fit, protection, and comfort. Because many may want to opt into something that's most protective, but if it's too uncomfortable that you don't wear it right, you may be erring on that side of caution, but not wearing it correctly. So again, other examples are that medical or surgical masks may not fit as appropriate as for some. There may be gaps around the side. So we do want to emphasize that fit and comfort are also things to consider when selecting a mask for yourself. The other thing with that, when we're looking at folks moving to or moving away from cloth masks, things that can be laundered, is the time to wear or the length of time and reuse of surgical or N95s. And so we've not received clear guidance from our state or federal partners, but again, if it's soiled or damaged, it's time to replace it. So we'll just continue to ask folks to be thoughtful and think about those things. Certainly we know that whether one wears makeup on the inside, it can come off on the inside of the mask, or if depending on what you're doing, if you're cooking over a stove or things like that, it can be soiled or laden with oil particles or other things like that. So as always, if it looks like it's soiled or dirty, it might be time to replace that. And as always, we'll continue to promote other layers of mitigation, which are things like physical distancing and staying home when you're ill. And to that point, In regards of testing, again, appreciate the support from all of our community partners and libraries to support the Test Iowa at Home program. We've got good geographic access, but we know that right now that there's been some of a strain on testing capacity because of the high demand, which we're happy to see. We're glad that folks are getting tested when either exposed or symptomatic, or just wanting to know whether or not if they're ill. And so we continue to provide guidance on testing and do our best to meet access as best as possible. But with that, happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Sam. What can you tell us about the drive-through testing sites that I've heard about at Liberty High School? I don't know if there's a second one.
Yeah, absolutely. So to our knowledge, the NOMI health system, it sounds like it has several test sites across the state, and they'll be or have set up one in North Liberty. And so they are operating independently and in partnership with other entities. I believe Iowa City School District, Des Moines School District, and Polk County have set up sites. We believe that there's intention to set up sites across other places, but at the moment we only know of the one that's stood up here. So again, we appreciate the support of testing capacity. We believe that they're in contact with the state health department so that the tests that they are taking are reported through the state surveillance system. So happy to see access continue to increase.
Well, thank you so much for all that you all are doing. I know that with the numbers going up, what would be the best place for an individual just to go to get information if they suspect they have COVID or in trying to figure out the new guidance?
We absolutely want them to contact us. They can reach us at the office. We have staff available, happy to walk through their specific scenario, because we know now that and as many are aware that we've suspended investigations and contact tracing for individual cases. We're happy to provide that information and guidance and walk through one specific scenario. So they can reach us at the main line at the department, 319-356-6040, and ask to speak to a disease prevention specialist. And we've certainly repurposed our contact tracing team to also be available throughout the day to help us with that call volume. So we're absolutely happy to walk through the scenarios.
But Sam, with students coming back in town now, presumably they've been other places where an Omicron is all over the country. Do we have any sense of, without having a crystal ball, when Omicron is likely to peak and start heading down around here?
That's a great question. To my knowledge, there's no good modeling. And actually, to note today, the state had made an announcement that it sounds like the CDC had modeling available on their site and have recently taken that down because Omicron is just far outpacing what modeling can do. And so it is a bit unknown at this point. But going forward, as we continue to see this increase in cases, we are really stressing all the different things and tools that we have and knowledge so that we can curb transmission as best as possible. But I apologize, a lot right now is somewhat unknown.
Thanks.
Great.
Sam, I really appreciate it. On your website, the Johnson County Public Health website, looks like it had been recently revamped that had 3 big buttons about what to do if you test positive or you think you have COVID or if someone in your household had COVID. But that repurposing or the updating of that information was really helpful. So I hope folks will check that out too.
Thank you. I'll be sure to pass that along to staff. Certainly the decision to suspend tracing investigations was extremely difficult, but we wanted to repurpose the site so that as soon as folks were there on the landing page, as you noted, that they would have that guidance directly for their situation as best as possible. So staff did a wonderful job to redesign that for high volume to be able to address those specific scenarios. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And I do see a hand raised. I asked that hands be raised on Zoom if there was an issue. So, maybe there wasn't. The hand is removed. We'll continue, but if there's any issues, please raise your hand and I'll just confirm that there is an issue. We are on to items number 3 through 8. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second, Taylor.
All right. Anyone from the public like to discuss this topic? If you are on Zoom, there's a button at the bottom for you to raise your hand, and I'll call upon you. And if you're present here, I ask that you come to the mic. There is a sign-in on the side table over there that you'll need to do at some point. Would anyone like to speak? Welcome. And everyone also gets 3 minutes. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Noah, live in Iowa City. I'm here to speak about a couple items on the consent agenda today. One was about the police review board's minutes about the meeting where they somehow found that ICPD was not in violation of using excessive force when they gassed flashbang, grenaded, whatever you want to call it, and OC sprayed hundreds of us that were standing in the middle of a road and had acts that violate the Geneva Convention. War crimes are committed against people who were peacefully standing in the street. And the CPRP, the review board showed how useless, how ineffective they are when they can't even find acts of war, excessive force. That is obscene. That's disgusting. And it's wrong. Like there's no excuse. That tear gassing that night was wrong. Yet this council has done nothing to rein in its cops since then. It's done nothing to change the culture. And then when those cops talk about on video, you hear them saying, "Oh, let them eat gas," saying just so proud of how they were gassing us. Bunch of them, from a whole bunch of different agencies. And yet this council won't do anything to rein in those cops. They give them millions of dollars a year, but not like when people need housing, the city doesn't do anything for it. When there's extreme weather events coming, the city doesn't pay. You look away all you want, but like these are the facts. When there was an adverse weather event coming, you all ignored me. Other people who demanded shelter for those people did nothing about it. But yet you can fund these cops millions and millions of dollars, but you can't provide the most basic safety to people who need shelter. One of the 3 basic things every community needs is shelter. Everyone needs that, and the city can't even do that. But they can fund millions to this force that will gas people if they stand up to police brutality. Well, not just police brutality, but yeah, do something about that. Actually invest in the people of the city instead of the cops who are violent and will gas us when they please.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address any item on the consent agenda? Seeing no one in the present or online, I am going to have council discussion at this point. Roll call, please.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Weiner. Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. We are on to item number 9, which is community comment. These are items people want to address that are not on the agenda. Speakers will be provided 3 minutes to speak. And I see some hands raised online. And if you're present and you want to speak, I ask that you step to the side. And there's a note card to sign up, and then step to the mic, and I'll call upon you. We're going to go online to Amel Ali. Welcome.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
All right. First and foremost, I just wanted to extend gratitude to you all for allowing a hybrid form for these meetings. because it allows me a chance to formally give you an invite to a TRC meeting that I reached out to you, a few of you guys, about a couple of weeks ago, regarding Ron Wakabayashi, where he would be presenting. And unfortunately, due to COVID and inclement weather, we decided to cancel our meeting. So I'm here to formally invite you guys again to this Thursday's meeting at 7 p.m. And you have the option to join via Zoom as well. And just to give you a little bit of background, Ron was the national director of the Japanese American Citizens League that made the redress campaign their priority. In 1988, President Reagan signed legislation HR 442 that issued a formal apology and monetary compensation for any living survivor of the wrongful incarceration. And I think that it's just a really great opportunity to hear from someone who's involved in a truth and reconciliation process. There's a lot that we could all learn. Secondly, I just wanted to make one comment regarding the joint entities meeting, and this kind of ties to the first presentation that was given about COVID update. I think it would be really interesting to pose the question to everyone about adequate masks and supplying adequate masks to the community, and especially those who are the most vulnerable to catching COVID, like supplying better masks to schools, supplying better masks to public libraries, and things like that. See how you guys can work together and put your money together to give people just a little bit more peace with everything that's going on, because there are so many unknowns with this variant. And frankly, I'm not at the place where I think it's going to go any better from here right now. Thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you. Nicholas, welcome.
Hello, sorry, good evening, Council. I guess it is evening now. Oh, geez, okay. I thought I only had 16 seconds there for a second. First off, I wanted to, like Amal, I wanted to thank you all for giving a hybrid option for these meetings. I'm in a similar situation where, given my childcare responsibilities, I would not be able to attend these meetings in any capacity other than to watch them online. So I do, in fact, appreciate that, despite regularly criticizing you all for the things you do. And with that in mind, I would also like to thank the Mayor Pro Tem for advocating for thinking a lot more systemically about childcare needs in the county. And I don't think it's inappropriate at all to try and bring these things up in joint entities meetings. We do need to be thinking more broadly about these issues because, frankly, childcare is a huge hassle, as I and many others know. But the thing that I wanted to speak most specifically on was in reference to something that Councilor Thomas said during the work session about thinking more systemically with regards to sort of the interrelation between transit, housing, basically a whole host of issues, because this council historically has had a very real problem of looking at any individual item on, say, a given council agenda and thinking about solely that item. This is a huge bugaboo for me. I have addressed you all, although in a different composition before, on precisely this issue. I believe it was in regards to the first consideration for the IWV Road project that this council has said many times in the past that you need to think more systemically about how you're doing development, like what long-term planning needs are and so forth. And yet when it comes time to actually make decisions about individual projects, that sort of systemic thinking kind of flies out the window. And I want to push back on something that actually the mayor said, because you can't shunt these issues exclusively to these strategic planning meetings, because we've seen what results if you do that, where then you make a determination on a completely ad hoc basis whether or not, given project conforms to X or Y plan, and then that's it. There's no sense of needing to do outreach or sort of like actively soliciting projects or sort of when you're actually looking at a given project, thinking about, say, the negative ramifications it might have for other goals that you have. And so I really want to applaud Councillor Thomas, and I think you should all listen to him and really take to heart what he has said, because what he is advocating for and what he wants you all to do is really what the city should have been doing 10 years ago. Because if you had, maybe we wouldn't be in the housing crisis that we have right now. And so, like I said, I just wanted to put a button on that. Again, thank the Mayor Pro Tem for her statements earlier, and thank you all for hybrid meetings. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands online. Anyone in the public? Welcome.
Hello, my name's Noah. Yes. Sorry, my thoughts. Yes. Last meeting, the first work session this year, I had to sit through the meeting where y'all were talking about making up new rules or whatever. And first I'll say I'm glad that most of you are against arresting me and others who come up and to speak. And I guess thank you for that, for not wanting people who use their voice to be arrested. Thank you. So there's that. But to set the record straight, the disruptions that have occurred at this meeting, past meetings, have been me and others coming up here to talk about. I'm talking about to have hybrid meetings so people don't have to risk their lives to come here, which I'm glad we finally have. I'm not going to thank y'all because you should have done that months ago, but I'm glad it's happening finally now that we get hybrid meetings. But yes, demanding housing and accessibility cannot be considered disruptions. That's not a disruption. If you think that's disruptive, that me saying you need to provide housing for people is disruptive, you need to search in your own heart and think what's wrong with it. You could think of like that somehow like something that could be wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with people demanding housing for people who need it. I have friends whose lives are literally at risk. The last meeting of 2021, when there was the winter trade show that we very luckily nicely did not get badly affected by. Now further west, they got in Nebraska and Des Moines, and they got a lot worse. We just got lucky that we didn't actually get it bad in this city. My friends' lives were literally at stake, and I spoke over time. Oh no, the city did nothing to protect them, and there's still haven't been done anything. There's no emergency plan for housing people. No one. I've emailed y'all about that. No one emailed me back about if the city has a plan for when there's adverse events happening, for giving shelter to people when there's no shelter. Also, some other serious problems. The shelter house, even though the winter shelter is finally open, is terrible outreach. When I was doing lunches to houseless people, I talked to 4 houseless people, literally 5 minutes away from the winter shelter, and all 4 of them told me they didn't even know the winter shelter was open. This was like a week after. No, I think it was more than a week after. It was last Thursday that I talked to them, and 4 people, none of them knew that the winter shelter was open. There's lots going wrong.
Thank you.
You fix that.
Thank you. Online, I see Taylor, followed by Dan. Welcome, Taylor.
Hi. My name is Taylor Cohn. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to organize my thoughts, so sorry if this is a little shuffled, but I just wanted to back up everything the other commenters have said so far. And I hope you really appreciate that people are talking to you and are telling you what it's like to actually live in this community outside of your own experience. That's really crucial to the work you're doing, and you should value it a lot, and you shouldn't be trying to put punitive, things in place in case they do it in a way that makes you feel bad or makes you have to stay here longer. So I would urge you, when you're thinking about like meeting protocols or something, to not have any kind of consequences for people not being germane or whatever. That's just not, it should not be a priority to you. And I would especially caution you to stay away from imitating the city of Des Moines in that respect. That is a very bad idea. They are committing like First Amendment violations over there. You should not be looking at them as a model. You should not be using violence in any way against your constituents. And I also wanted to address the winter shelter. I'm so glad that that became a priority a couple weeks ago and was open, but why was it not a priority before then? This is not any kind of attack on the organization that that you contract with or whatever it is you do. The fact of the matter is that they were not able to pull this off, and your constituents suffered. Your unhoused residents suffered. And there was a long time where it was, maybe a warm December for you, where you can go inside your home, but to sleep in outside, why was there no shelter? Why didn't someone say, oh my gosh, 911, we need to open one of our many public buildings to have an emergency space so that people are not in the cold? Why is there no, it's not that difficult to have something in place that's redundant. Even if it's just on an ad hoc basis, if the winter shelter is not open, it should have been everyone's priority to drop everything and get that open. And it's not a matter of pointing fingers at whose fault it is. It's just the simple fact that the city government is supposed to provide basic services so that residents can survive. And that didn't happen this year. So now that the shelter is open and people have a place to go, can you please think about how you can make sure this never happens again? Never. And I know 2 of you are new. Welcome. Can you prioritize this in your time as you're figuring out what you're gonna do on this council? Can we make sure this never happens again, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Good evening, Council. And I would like to start by saying thank you for having hybrid meetings. I'm in quarantine at the moment because America can be dumb, but I guess that's where we're at. So I would like to comment about meeting protocols. I just have something quick I would like to say to Council and Mr. Mayor, Councilor Weiner, Mayor Pro Tem, all the people who are working on coming up with the city's response to these new protocols. Please just consider tactics of de-escalation or just ways, because it seems like the city and Mr. Mayor, it's 0 to 100. There's definite alternatives between just saying, hey, can you please stop talking, to, hey, we're gonna arrest you. So I would just like to have you all keep that in mind. And I would also like to comment about the joint entities meeting. I think that because with the issue of the MRAP and armored vehicles, I think that might be a good discussion with the county to have about their usage of the MRAP at that time. I would also like to say that I think there should probably be a council work session regarding armored vehicles because the Iowa City Police Department has been using the Linn County Bearcat. And I don't know what the details are about that, if we're giving money to the Linn County Sheriff's Department for the usage or what that looks like, but that's pretty concerning. And I think that council deserves answers to that and just to know what's going on, and the public does. And I think now is the time, the ball is in the court of the city for you all to make a definite judgment about armored vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Anyone else on Zoom would like to speak? Welcome. I'll have you speak first, and then when you're done, there's a sign in. But you can speak now. I'll have you come speak. Sure. And then after you're done, you can sign in.
Okay.
Welcome. Please state your name and what city you're from.
My name's Dave Moore, and I'm from Iowa City. Let me ask you, it's 3 minutes. If my reading glasses fog up, can I lower this slightly, or do you want me to keep it up?
You're fine to take it off as long as people are 6 feet away
great.
from you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the rest of the council. I want to talk about the mill for a minute, and I don't want to be perceived as somebody who's pursuing lost causes of trivial matters. This may be a narrow path to putting the actual mill location back on our plates again as a community asset, but it's certainly not a trivial matter. I want to just explain, and I'm sure most of you know about this, but that if the mayor unilaterally, Mr. Teague, or maybe possibly its constable, if you were to call a special meeting this week, and I guess it would have to be this week because I think the demo is scheduled for Monday, a week from today, or yesterday. If you were to put a special meeting, if you were to hold one to consider whether the mill has historic status, then 4 out of 7 city councilors could decide, if they did agree with that they would declare a public hearing sometime. That's the process, I think. You call a special meeting, and then you do have a discussion, you do a 4 out of 7 vote as to whether to have a public hearing as to the status of the mill. And that in itself this week, I believe, would put the demolition on hold for 60 days. So I'm just urging you to consider this sort of out of the box thing. And my notes are just from an email that I sent to a friend when he asked me what's going on with the mill today. So if they're a little scattered, that's it, okay. This building, that is given so much, I'm gonna go fast because I don't know where my 3 minutes are here,
It's over there.
Okay. This is like in a wrestling match or something is what it reminds me of. But I'm not here to wrestle. Okay. Okay, so the building that has given so much to so many is kind of going down without so much as a whimper, except if you look at social media, you'll see, whether it's Little Village or any other website, that people are hurting deeply about this. Hundreds and hundreds of people all over the country, and especially here, they're really hurting. I think someone said it best, that they thought that everybody thought somebody else was taking care of this. And COVID, of course, contributed to that.
Thank you.
Was that 3 minutes?
Yes.
Jesus.
Yep. Thank you, though.
God, I haven't even started.
Yep.
Can I come back after?
No. Yep.
Well, I thought the 42 seconds was I was 42 seconds in.
No, it was 3 minutes given.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
So
Can
the
I
person
have-
behind you can come forth at this point.
Mr. Teague, can I go an extra minute? Is that possible with so little?
No.
I'd like to tell you the reasons why, if possible.
No.
Okay.
But thank you, though. Well, I'll have the person behind you come. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Chris Carmen, and I'm a resident of Iowa City, and I'm also here to speak about the mill. And sort of to echo something Dave said, this is not an effort to villainize anyone, including the developer, but just thinking about the historic significance of the mill, certainly as a cultural asset and resource in our community. For 60 years, first in one location in the downtown, and then 50 years in the current location. And to me, it's an example of living history. It's not something that happened 100 years ago, but it's something that if you were to take a poll of Iowa City residents, I think probably a large number would have an emotional and social connection with the mill, whether they went there to hear a politician speak who was running for president, or to be part of some sort of organization that was meeting there, or to hear Dave Moore or Greg Brown or anyone else in our rich musical culture here. And so, I know that it's a challenge to think about doing something at this point, but at very least, I'd say that it's worth giving local citizens a chance to have some input, to go through a process of historic review, and then for an objective body to weigh the pros and cons. But I think that it would be it would be an act of paying attention to the concerns of local citizens. And at very least, I'd encourage the council to think about the mill as an object lesson. Even if nothing can reverse what's already in process now, how as a community do we preserve these important pockets of culture, especially when it's a private business that has significant community benefit. And so there are special considerations, I think, in these situations, but it's well worth, before we lose all of this sort of grassroots culture that's, that is very much part of the fabric of Iowa City, is there some sort of process for stepping back and saying, these are, maybe there's a definition for what this cultural, historic significance is and how it can be preserved.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to address an item that is not on our agenda? Seeing no one, we're on to item number 10, which is planning and zoning matters. Item number 10A is rezoning IWV Road Southwest. Ordinance conditionally rezoning approximately 53.36 acres from county agricultural to intensive commercial, approximately 17.03 acres from county agricultural to interim development commercial, and approximately 9 acres from rural residential to intensive commercial for land located west of the intersection of IWV Road Southwest and Slothauer Road. Could I get a motion to pass and adopt, please?
So moved, Burgess.
Second, Alter.
Would anyone from the public like to address this topic? If you're online, please raise your hand. If you're in public, please step to the mic. Welcome.
Thank you. John Marner with MMS Consultants representing the applicant. I'd just like to take a quick moment to thank council, the members that have participated in the past discussions to consider this matter. And I'm available for any other questions. I understand there's 2 new council members, and I'm available for any questions if there are any from those members.
Thank you. Anyone online? I see no hands. Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Burgess?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 11, we're going to have Councilor Burgess recuse herself. Item number 11 is proposed South District Self-Supported Municipal Improvement District. This is an ordinance amending Title III, Finance, Taxation, and Fees of the City Code to add a new chapter to establish the South District Self-Supported Municipal Improvement District pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 386, Code of Iowa, and providing for the establishment of an operation fund and levy of an annual tax in connection therewith. Could I get a motion to pass and adopt?
So moved.
Second, Thomas.
Moved by Weiner, seconded by Thomas. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Please step up to the mic if you're here in person. And we have a hand raised on Zoom. Welcome, Nicholas.
Hello again, Council. I haven't had a chance to address this issue when it has been on the Council agenda in the past due to lack of hybrid meetings, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to rehash that issue. I did get a chance recently to speak to a couple of the organizers responsible for putting the SMID. And okay, actually, can I? This is going to sound really silly, but I do have to get it off my chest. There's no H in SMID. Can we please not say SMID? Sounds very strange to me. Maybe that's just a petty thing, but whatever. Anyway, I had a chance to talk to some organizers who worked on the proposal, and I was actually really impressed by the differences between this proposal and the downtown district that it's modeled on. But the thing is, a lot of what happened with the downtown district and also the effects that all of those sort of like development priorities had on the near areas around downtown, especially with regards to housing, the businesses that left, and also the transformations of the Ped Mall from what used to be sort of like, a commons for a lot of people who, live in the city into the, essentially, I guess you could say, resort that it is now. I was impressed by the fact that the organizers themselves are really sort of conscientious about involving residents in the planning process. But the reason why I'm addressing you all about this is because a lot of what happened with the downtown district was at the behest of the city. And I know when it comes to sort of the gentrification effects that could possibly result, not just with the South District SMID, but also the sort of the larger sort of form-based code issue in the South District, and also the way in which the city clearly wants to gentrify that part of town. I think it's really important to honor the wishes and the desires of the people who put this proposal together, that the city actually stand out of the way of that, and also to, how should I put this, not impose upon Angie Jordan and the others sort of an impossible situation in which they have to sort of advocate for the existence of this improvement district, while at the same time also implicitly advocating for the sort of the gentrification effects that the city clearly wants to have on the south side. And so that is all on you to be extremely conscientious about that and not to impose upon that part of town, which has historically been very socioeconomically diverse, what's already happening. It's becoming much more, it's becoming much richer, it's becoming much whiter. And if you don't think very conscientiously about how those effects happen and how the city is complicit in them, then I have a feeling that it's going to go the same way of sort of the so-called core neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Eleanor Levin. I have commented on this previously, so I'm just going to say a couple of things very quickly. One is that I'd like to clarify that the organizers and the residents of the South District SMID are the same people. This SMID came from the residents and from the current business owners, and those are the people driving it, those are the people working on it week to week, those are the people working behind the scenes to make sure that it's successful. And really, that's all I have to say today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address this topic? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Noah. And all I have to say is practically 99.99% of the time, the capital business owners, especially those lots of capital acts contrary to the interests of the residents. So I mean that's, anyways. So yeah, this city, as I've said previous meetings, needs to, if they're going to have this, have guidelines to control their cops, so the cops don't do what they do when you gentrify, just push out the people violently, especially the houseless folks, because it's already happening on the south side. It's happened more and more of this. So control your cops. Order them to stop from harassing the houseless folks. Sorry. Oh yes, also pass an ordinance to prohibit Iowa City cops from driving an MRAP around in the south side, or any side, anywhere. Like no ICPD cops driving any military vehicles. Ban that. You can do that. Do it. Last year, you all talked about how you were against militarized police, yet we still have militarized police. They still use their military vehicles. They had their military vehicle that night when they committed war crimes against your residents, the residents of the city. The MRAP was there when that happened. Which would make sense that weapon of war would be there when they're committing war crimes, but you also do something about that. So you have a bit of control over how you control your cops. Obviously, there's the state law stuff that just makes it harder for stuff, but stuff like that, you can very easily control what the equipment they use. They don't need an MRAP. They don't need Bearcat. They don't need any of that. They don't need to be using any of that. And you should ban them from using any of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address this topic? Seeing no one. Council discussion.
Just want to underscore what Ms. Levin said, that it's been a, and I think you, Mayor Pro Tem, know this because you're probably part of it. This has truly been an effort of the residents to put this together and push it forward, and I'm really happy to see it come to fruition.
I would just like to add and commend Angie Jordan and Eleanor and Tasha Laird and a number of other resident organizers who actually worked very hard and went back to businesses and nonprofits who are also signed on to do this. It is very true that any SMID that is created by those who are in the area. But there was initially quite a bit of resistance by property owners who did not want to buy into this. Once persistence and explanation and education occurred, that this can be something that is eminently shapeable by the people who live there and own property there, then you really started to see a slow change in people buying into it. And this is entirely due to the persistence of the residents in that area, and who very much want to strengthen and fortify the neighborhood and the area while still retaining its own character. And I just think that it's a real boon to the area.
I'm super excited to have this be on our agenda tonight as the pass and adopt. And I'm not going to repeat all the thank yous, but the South District Neighborhood Association and individuals within the South District has really been impressive in so many facets, and this is just one way of the community coming together and actually creating an avenue through conversation and relationship building to be here with this proposal today. So happy to vote in favor of it. If no more comments, roll call, please.
Harmson.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Teague.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 with one recusal. All right, and we are on to item number 12, which is CPRB expand membership. This is an ordinance amending the Title 8 entitled Police Regulations, Chapter 8 entitled Community Police Review Board to increase the composition of the board from 5 members to 7 members. This is second consideration. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved, Thomas.
Second, Taylor.
All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? If so, please step to the mic or raise your hand online. Yep. And I'll have you come forth first, and then you can sign in once you're done.
Okay, cool.
Welcome.
I'm Bridget. I just want to address what the cops are doing specifically about sexual assault victims. Personally, I submitted mine in October, and I followed up with it multiple times, and they haven't contacted me, and they kept saying 4 to 6 weeks. But again, I submitted mine in October. So just it's definitely a good thing for closure. So just wondering if you could look into that. They're just their process, not just for me, but just for everyone and my parents. So yeah.
Thank you. Anyone online in the public? Welcome.
Hello. So yeah, just pretty much just said last time, instead of have it so no former cops ever on the police review board, since former cops are of course going to find their fellow cop folks that they didn't commit offenses. I mean, that's how it goes. We all know this, are aware of how it works when cops or former cops investigate current cops. And of course, they're not going to find any wrongdoing with them. The overwhelming majority of the time. That's why this review board never does anything regardless. I think like even more like cop supporting folks on there is going to do anything to change it. And this board they couldn't even condemn war crimes. And you think you need to have more cops, more supportive cops on this board that's supposed to be reviewing the cops? It's asinine to me. Also, just think a little more about the police problem, and having currently the first response to mental health crisis is send cops and then possibly have the mental health after, so still have first responders be cops. Mental health crisis, that is an absolutely terrible way to do things. That's how you get people killed. Someone who has luckily not had the cops show up on many times in my life. I've had more than my fair share of mental health crises that cops in 911 could have been called to, and I really doubt I'd be alive here today if the cops had responded to some of those. Must have a mental health crisis, and when people like me, neurodivergent people especially, we don't get along with cops. These cops don't know how to deal with us. And ICPD does not know how to de-escalate. When I film ICPD, almost every single time I get cops getting mad at me for filming them. They get in my face. They're like threatening to arrest me because I'm filming them. And yet these people are supposed to be de-escalating situations and responding to mental health crises, and you think that's not going to harm people? Again, asinine. Fix that. You know how you've been told like multiple times by many different people how to change that, but you haven't done anything. Time to do something about that.
Thank you. Welcome, Dan.
Hi. So regarding the CPRB, or whatever the acronym is, I'm sorry, the Citizens Police Review Board. So this was a board that recently declared that the June 3rd tear gassing was justified and that there was no misconduct which occurred that night. Anybody who was there that night knows that misconduct occurred. People who were just sitting or kneeling on the ground with their hands in the air were repeatedly shot with rubber bullets, and they were tear gassed. Now, the composition of this current board was to declare that those war crimes justified, right? I don't know if there are any current or former ICPD officers on the department, but I do know that if you added officers from that department, they would be inclined to say, hey, this was justified. Because, I mean, anybody who's ever seen a cop movie knows that cops don't screw over other cops. I mean, I've heard people who've been on the Iowa City Police Review Board, Citizens Police Review Board, talk about how hard it is, even without the presence of cops, to try to impugn police officers because people just want to let them do whatever they do. And I know that on other boards, former police officers are very much like that. So, I mean, this is about the efficacy of the Police Review Board and the process. And frankly, I think that letting any former ICPD officer join the board would taint that efficacy. Be them out of the department 2 years, 5 years. Personally, I think any number of years should disqualify them from reviewing other officers. I mean, we know how it works. And I think if you talk to any former members of the board, they would agree. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address this topic? Welcome, Taylor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to chime in and also say that you should not have cops on this board. It is a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address this topic? Seeing no one, council discussion. Roll call, please.
Actually, I do have a question. One of the things that I know has been brought up about the need for police presence on the board or membership is because there's often process that can be explained, and that there is a perspective from having a career in law enforcement. Because I do remember also, it's not necessarily that it needs to be a police officer, but someone within law enforcement. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you for that clarification. One of the things that I will admit I've been thinking about, though, is there a need for that police officer, or, sorry, after I just got it clarified, for that law enforcement officer to have a vote? I don't know, and I apologize because I have not seen the minutes other than having scanned them, so that discussion may have already well been had at the commission level. So I want to put that out there because I do think it's important to have sort of someone who can sort of walk through a certain perspective given a situation. I think that can be helpful. But I was wondering about, is there a need for a voting membership?
Currently, I could tell you the chief of police or designee attends all of the meetings, and so he can provide that perspective, with the exception of the moments in which they adjourn to executive session. Then the chief does not go into executive session. I'd want to talk with the city attorney's office and explore that concept of whether somebody could go into that executive session without a vote. I'll see if you have thoughts on that.
Sure. Just as you and Kelly, for example, go into executive session with the city council, that person could be invited in, yes. But right now, all members have a vote, so you would have to have a substantive change to the ordinance to prohibit if you don't want anybody with any law enforcement experience, because that's currently in the code and has been from the beginning. You'd have to make that amendment. So, but you certainly could.
And I recognize too that the commission themselves voted on this and agreed unanimously. So I'm not posing that to throw a wrench in the works or to go against what members of the board who are currently on it are saying. Is simply a point that I don't think that had been raised before, or at least it was a point of confusion for me.
Well, I'll say that when I first heard that, and I think it was in Coralville, where they were getting their CPRB together, and they wanted law enforcement apart. That was a part of the initial discussion, and I was in the thought process that was not a good idea. As I began to speak to various people, including the NAACP here in Iowa, I came to the conclusion that, these are the CPR review board members, and they're making the request. It could always be changed. I think this council, it is our duty to look at all of it. And so I did get, I am comfortable moving forward with it. I do think that if something should change, the council has every right to come back and redraw how we wrote this.
Certainly. And as a recent former commission member, that was sort of what was guiding my comment about not wanting to go against the commission. I think I may be where you were at, Mr. Mayor, that I find it somewhat problematic, even recognizing that they're one vote of many. That said, I also want to put faith in the commission members, having been on a commission, not the same one, but the notion that we appoint people to carry out in-depth conversations and to really look at different issues that come before them. It grants them sort of a body of experience and of knowledge that I wanted to at least state out here that my hesitation or my question was not to question their judgment per se, because they are in the thick of it. But I did have to say, as someone who is new to this, that the notion of having someone in law enforcement on a board that reviews the police seemed sort of at odds with one another. So I just wanted to sort of say, here's both sides of it for me, and I appreciate the license to process that.
And the council can also waive that requirement at the time of appointment, right? As long as we have, if we agree on that, we don't have to appoint anyone with law enforcement expertise. And it hasn't always been a police officer. I know we had an attorney who had actually, I think, prosecuted police misconduct in the past, had sort of filled that law enforcement spot on the board before.
All right, roll call, please.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes.
Burgess?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 13 is Farmers Market Insurance. Ordinance amending Title 10 of the City Code entitled Use of Public Ways and Property, Chapter 11 entitled Farmers Market to require all vendors to carry insurance. This is first consideration. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved, Burgess.
Second, Alter.
All right. We'll have Jeff kind of.
Yeah, I'll just briefly cover this one. So this is being done after just kind of typical reviews of our risk management operations, farmers market operations. We currently only require liability insurance for those that are grilling out on the street during those farmers markets. It's certainly best practice and what we found to be common in comparable farmers markets that the vendors also inside the market carry a very common general liability policy. So this would be an ordinance change to require that insurance requirement. Again, some of the cities that have similar requirements here in Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Cedar Falls, Des Moines, Bettendorf, Sioux City. We didn't do a comprehensive review of all cities, but we wanted to make sure we weren't asking for something that wasn't standard in other comparable size markets. So I can try to answer any questions that you have tonight.
Jeff, do you have any idea if most of these vendors carry insurance anyway, and we're just not aware of it? And the second part of my question is: do we think that this is going to push out any smaller vendors?
Well, those are two very good questions, and I think the answer to your first question is probably some of them carry it, because we know we have vendors that might vend, for example, up in Cedar Rapids. So I would say some probably carry it. Your larger, more established vendors may do that, depending on where else they vend and what other insurance they may be pursuing on their own. Would it push folks out? That's certainly not the intended consequence of this action. It's something we'll have to watch closely, and if we do see that we have vendors that can't make payments, we may have to try to explore some programs to assist them, whether that's fee waivers on the stalls. They're currently making payments to be a vendor. We'll have to look at that a little bit, but I think it's a really smart idea to require that insurance and then figure out if there's unintended consequences, how to mitigate those.
Thanks.
I would think too, a conversation that we had, just kind of explaining who is not covered by this and who would still be exempt. If you could share that with the public.
Yeah, so they're really looking at the vendors. If you are, some of you have campaigned and you go out to the farmer's market. If you have a child that's been a part of the Kids Day market, or you're just out there passing along information, which is very common in our markets, you wouldn't be required. These are the actual vendors that are selling goods on a regular basis at our market.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Great. Public comment, and if you're online, raise your hand, and if you're in person, just come up. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Noah, and I share the same concern as you, Janice, about the pushing out smaller producers, people. So, like, to make, if you are going to have the insurance, I don't have, probably it's a good idea to have insurance, but if they are going to have that requirement to have it so it doesn't hurt small producers and people who don't, like, do it. They just, like, do it on this side. They're just, like, it's not, so you're not pushing out people who, the unintended consequences type thing, like you're saying. So just make sure that if you're doing that to actually include that with there. So and to do it now instead of reacting to that, to do more proactive instead of reactive. Because that's, I honestly I don't know exactly what you would do when you were talking, Jeff. But like, so you said, you made it sound like we'll see what's happening like once it happens. The problem with that is you're already gonna have like the negative effects. But, and then if you're reacting to that, but you should be proactive with that and for the insurance, have the insurance and have the programs already in place so people aren't discouraged away from it. So you already have it, so it doesn't, you don't have those unintended consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address this topic? If online, please raise your hand. Seeing no one, council discussion.
I just want to say thank you for doing the research of the comparable cities. That was just starting to jot that out as a question, and you answered it in advance. So incredibly helpful for us to sort of see context-wise how common this is, so that to comments points about being proactive, it's also that this is not some kind of likely will not become a surprise that this is going to be introduced potentially for the vendors. And I just echo that, yeah, if we sort of keep in mind some of the smaller vendors who may struggle a little bit, that we work to keep them a part of the farmers market here in Iowa City.
I have no doubt that if our staff finds some challenges with individuals, that we will navigate that and make sure that people still have the opportunity to be a part. The one thing I will say, insurance, even though none of us like to pay it, I would assume, but it really is for your protection. So if something should happen and someone gets sued, a vendor, then they have some protection, and it, potentially won't go into causing them much financial heartbreak. So insurances are there for a reason, and I think this is the right step.
That's a good point. Thank you.
All right, roll call, please.
Teague.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Burgess.
Yes.
Harmson.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Number 14, Downtown SMID Amendment. Ordinance amending Title III, Finance, Taxation, and Fees, Chapter 7, Iowa City Downtown Self-Supported Municipal Improvement District, Section 4, Operation Fund of the City Code to conform to the amendments in Iowa Code Chapter 386 regarding multi-residential properties. This is first consideration. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved, Thomas.
Second, Weiner.
And I'll invite Jeff back up.
Yeah, just real quick, the intent with this ordinance is to maintain status quo. And the change that's happening that's prompting this ordinance is at the state level. We talked actually quite a bit about it on your budget Saturday. We have those multi-residential properties that are being reclassified as residential as part of that 2013 property tax reform. The downtown SMID collects the SMID tax on the multi-residential properties, but it does not collect on residential. So as the state was going through this transition, this kind of oversight was recognized. The state now allows for, if you were formerly classified as multi-residential, for you to continue to pay into that SMID. So this ordinance would allow us to continue to collect those SMID dollars for the downtown district on those multi-residential properties that soon will be residential. Sorry if that's a little confusing, but again, the intent is to maintain status quo. If you were already paying into the downtown SMID, you'll continue to. If you weren't, you will continue not to.
Okay, great. Any questions? No? Anyone from the public like to address this topic? If online, please raise your hand. Seeing no one, council discussion.
I'm just glad it's something they didn't try and take away from us at the same time as they took change the title of the kind of property.
Yeah. I actually agree with this move from the state, so, yep. Roll call, please.
Thomas?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes.
Burgess?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Item number 15 is Dover Street traffic calming. Resolution authorizing the installation of speed bumps on Dover Street between Perry Court and Muscatine Avenue. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Weiner.
Second, Harmson.
All right, and welcome, Kent.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Kent Ralston, Transportation Planner. As the mayor mentioned, the item before you is a resolution authorizing the installation of speed humps on Dover Street between Perry Court and Muscatine Avenue. Quickly, by way of background, the residents of Dover Street have successfully completed the City of Iowa City's traffic calming program based on traffic speeds. Staff discussed traffic calming with the residents of Dover Street at a meeting held back in October of last year, where the consensus of residents who attended the meeting was to move forward with the request for speed humps and then survey themselves, essentially. Then about a week later, on October 27th, a survey was sent to residential properties along Dover Street to measure support for the speed humps. And in all, 24 households returned their survey postcards, representing a 61% response rate. And then all of the 24 postcards received by the deadline indicated support for the proposed speed humps, which obviously represents 100% in favor of that. Note there were 2 postcards arrived after the deadline. One was for and one was against the proposal. The other thing I would add is that it's also important to note that prior to engaging with the neighborhood, staff reviews the speed data and street context with the city engineer, the streets department, and the police and fire departments. And the consensus of the committee was that speed humps were the most safe and effective means for lowering speeds in the neighborhood. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So does this end up being, it sounded like from one of the letters, one of the emails I received, that this ends up being used essentially as an escape route for some people who don't want to stay on the main.
Right, so this is a north-south oriented street for those that aren't familiar, and it happens to ultimately connect Friendship down to Muscatine, so it is sort of a cut through for a lot of folks. Also, Willow Inn School is in the same stretch of Dover, so this is the part north of Muscatine, not south. That's correct.
Yeah, I was gonna add, that's in my neighborhood, and actually some of my kids' friends live on that street, so I've driven on that a lot of times. When the Scott Boulevard project was going on, I know the traffic among their street as well as another street that I live on really picked up, and so a lot of people were cutting through a lot more. But yeah, no, I think this is the speed bumps make sense. That's a really busy piece of, between the Southeast Junior High being a couple blocks away, 2 elementary schools within a block of that. Dover Street in general, the whole length there is really busy at certain points of the day. So
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I agree. And what's interesting about Dover, if you were to drive down it, it feels like a street that would not have high speeds. It's not particularly wide. It has parking on both sides. We've sort of done everything we can at this point, but the speed data does show that there is still a problem.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? If so, please come at this time. And raise your hand online. Seeing no one, council discussion.
I appreciate the comments we received. We did get some letters, both sides of this issue, and it certainly showed that things can be seen differently by different people. But I think the game changer for me was the most recent letter or correspondence that we received just the other day from someone who lives on there and has actually seen accidents and watched people who were apparently exceeding the speed limit. And I think that was kind of a decision maker for me that this is needed.
If no other comments, roll call, please.
Weiner? Yes.
Alter? Yes.
Burgess?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Could I get a motion to accept correspondence?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right. We are on to item number 16, which is announcement of vacancies new. Applicants must reside in Iowa City and be 18 years of age unless specific qualifications are stated. Civil Service Commission, 1 vacancy to fill a 4-year term. April 5th, 2022 through April 6th, 2026. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. on February 22nd, 2022. Item number 17 is announcement of vacancies previous. Applicants must reside in Iowa City and be 18 years of age unless specific qualifications are stated. Housing and Community Development Commission, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. February 8th, 2022. Airport Zoning Board of Adjustment, 1 vacancy to fill a 5-year term. Airport Zoning Commission, Iowa City Representative, 1 vacancy to fill a 6-year term. Board of Appeals Building Design Professional, 1 vacancy to fill a 5-year term. Historic Preservation Commission, East College Street, 1 vacancy to fill a 3-year term. Historic Preservation Commission, Jefferson Street, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Housing and Community Development Commission, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Senior Center Commission, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. And vacancies will remain open until filled. We are at item number 18, and we're going to invite USG to speak to us, and welcome back. Class has started.
Well, thank you. So yeah, that was my first thing that I was going to say, actually. Yeah, it's our first day of classes today, and one of our biggest concerns and most apparent concerns at the moment has been the concerning lack of COVID protocols on campus for this semester. U Iowa is currently ranking last in Big Ten COVID protection policies, and the city thus must take aggressive action to help address this issue. That being said, the Welcome Center at the IMU does provide, and student health locations in the IMU and West Lawn, as well as in resident halls, all have COVID test kits available this semester, and students may also consider requesting a free COVID-19 test for pickup or mail delivery through Test Iowa. There's also a limited supplies of K95 masks on limited locations on campus. I've been noticing them a lot in like our Tippy Business School and whatnot. But USG members are also attending or will be attending the Association of Big Ten Students at the end of January to discuss fraternity and sorority life, food insecurity, and mental health and wellness. We're excited to be working to address all these topics with council as well, and are excited to continue that work. We are still seeking feedback on our Homeless Week survey in order to inform future discussions. A link will be provided to you all again in the email that I will be sending out. And yeah, that will be all. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, and hope you enjoyed your time away and the rest of the students. And now it's time to get back to work. All right, item number 19 is city council information and updates, community events, that type stuff.
But further to Sam Jarvis earlier, if anybody can go online now, it was launched a day early, and go to the website covidtests.gov and order 4 rapid COVID tests to be sent to your home for free. So that was just launched today. And otherwise appreciated the city's sponsorship of the MLK events yesterday. Heard your voice recorded. Some really good events that were pretty COVID safe, I thought. So.
Following actually on your heels about COVID, I got an email from the school district that they are doing a vaccination clinic for 12-year-olds and up at Tate on the 24th, and then also at Kirkwood Elementary on the 25th. So for those who are eligible, it just came out today at about 4:30 or so.
I do want to mention, as I started out this evening, talking about the life of Dr. King and just that commemoration that we do annually. And I think it's very important for us as a community to continue to do that. And happy that it was done in some fashion. There was a hybrid option for people. So that was great to still have that available here locally. I want to remind people that you've been hearing, COVID is off the rails a little bit. And I think that wearing masks, as we know, that's one way that we can do it. I'm tired of it. Everybody here that I know is tired of it. But when you're getting together in family gatherings, it might feel a little awkward at first. But for me, it's almost like a security blanket now, where I just don't really feel comfortable in close proximity without it. So I would just encourage people, just mask up just a little while longer. We're going to get through this at some point, and we are in this together. Any other comments? We're going to go to item number 20, which was report on items from city staff, our city manager.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Our deputy city manager.
I don't have anything tonight, Mayor.
City attorney.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Filling in, yes. And then our city clerk.
I wish I had something.
How about number 21? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Weiner, seconded by Burgess. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.